Hey, and welcome back to Media Talks TV with Tony J. Um, I just wanted to say Happy New Year's to everybody. And man, it has been one hell of a New Year's week. I mean, we got a lot of stuff, we got a lot of ground to cover in January. And I wanted to really dive right into this whole Katt Williams fiasco. Um, it's I saw a Club Shay Shay interview. A lot of blogs are blowing up talking about the Club Shay Shay interview. And I must say it was one hell of an eye opener. Um, Katt Williams really gave us really an inside breakdown of how toxic the comedy industry can be. He said a lot of things. Um, I would say so many people think that Katt Williams is uh, not telling the truth, airing out dirty laundry, whatever you might call it. I believe that he opened the door to an entertainment industry that could be very, very dark and toxic. It's probably one of the reasons why I've never really had such an affinity for the entertainment industry. And I feel like listening to Katt Williams helped me understand why I was always right all along. The entertainment industry, when once people are in that industry, especially being a comedian, sometimes the ego gets to their head. And I think what Katt Williams was really trying to get to is the issue of ego, joke stealing, people having to come up faster than other people who aren't really considered comedians. And I've been, I've been watching Katt Williams for a very long time, going all the way back to the Comic View days. And I've also followed Ricky Smiley, even though I don't know much about Ricky Smiley other than Comic View. But what was so interesting about that interview is he's basically covered the last 20 to 30 years of him being in the industry and seeing what people have done to him and also done to some of the greatest comedians of all time, especially people like Bernie Mac. I would say the interview was actually funny. It was very funny. The whole thing with Steve Harvey having a man weave or a male unit. I got a kick out of that. Uh, the whole thing about Earthquake not being able to read, and I mean, man, he really laid everything out on the table, and people are angry at him. But sometimes people have to be told what goes on behind closed doors because most people don't know how dirty the industry can be. And knowing from watching that interview, I actually went back and I thought about SNL. Um, I thought about people like Chevy Chase and John Belushi. and how they had beef with each other, how they, how people were a little bit. I think Chevy Chase was supposed to be considered the comedic newcomer to come on SNL, and he felt as though John Belushi kind of stole the show, and there was always this disagreement between the two. Even though there were a lot of rumors that said that Chevy Chase was actually a very mean guy behind closed doors, and most people don't understand that. But you're starting to hear even in the even in the late night circuit, I've heard stuff about Jimmy Fallon being mean to his staff. And I can admit that Jimmy Fallon, you know, I've never found him particularly funny. And it was only a couple of episodes where I felt like, I kind of backed away from him because I didn't really find him particularly funny. And then there was the whole thing. Also, people forget the whole thing with Conan O'Brien and how good of a comedy writer he was, and he got passed over for Jimmy Fallon. So, you know, when I think about all of that, and then I think about what Cat Williams has said about how the industry is, especially in the black comedy circuit, it made me go back and understand the dynamics of how that industry worked. And he really gave you an eye-opening experience about, some of your favorite comedians aren't who they really say they are. And I think one of the biggest problems with comedy, especially, um, comedy isn't looked at in a positive light as people might think it. Like every comedian that all had either a drinking problem or a drug problem, or they were really clinically depressed. And, out of a handful of comedians, almost a quarter of them died of a drug overdose. Especially some of the comedians that I think about, um going back to the 90s, it was Chris Farley. And as much as I always enjoyed watching Chris Farley on SNL, I don't think SNL was ever the same after Chris Farley's death. And I remember there were rumors, I think a long time ago, with Michael Lauren and Chris Farley, and why he got kicked off of SNL, because he felt as though, well, I think I've heard this story many times, especially on TV, especially on True Hollywood story about Chris Farley. But he bumped heads with Michael Lauren on SNL, and that kind of prompted Michael Lauren to actually fire Chris Farley because of his drinking problem, because of his issue with drugs. And he was like, okay, well, I dealt with it with John Belushi. I'm not dealing with it with you. And he knew what road was coming up for Chris Farley. And a lot of our favorite comedians all had some type of grappling with drugs and drinking at some point in the tenure of their career. Um, I remember hearing stuff about, the issue. Um, with another particular comedian. I'm not going to name, but he was on one show and he had issues with drinking, had a drinking problem, and then of course you have Richard Pryor, who also had issues with cocaine and free base, of course. And then there's Red Fox, um, also had issues with cocaine and abused drugs. And all of them really, a lot of them really lived very sad, tragic lives. Um, Another honorable mention, Lenny Bruce had issues with drugs as well. Um, a lot of these people they go into the realm of stand up and it's really a dark avenue. And when you've made it and you break out, it just seems like, okay, well, you're at the top, and then when you're at the top, you can't handle the celebrity that comes along with it. And that's one of the things that, is has always been a thing in that industry. They get to the top, they're the biggest star, and then it all goes to their head, and then first it's the drinking, then it's the women, then it's the drugs, and then you're not showing up to gigs and you're not showing up to do tours and all this other shit that comes along with it, and people fall very hard in that area. Only a few have made it out of stand up and became big stars. But I know and I remember a long time ago somebody told me the worst thing you had to do is do the comedy clubs after you've done movies and TV shows and stuff like that. It's it's kind of the most tragic thing for a star to go back to doing when they're not making a lot of money at the gigs. And the thing about being a comedian is kind of similar to being in the rap game almost. You know, you get that certain apex, so you reach that top of that apex, and then you kind of fizzle out, and people don't understand that. But you know even with rappers, just like comedians, um at some point they have a high point in their career and then they reach their peak, and then it's like, well, what else are you going to be able to do? You either do movies or you can go back to doing tours on the comedy circuit. And that's one of the things that I find that I've always found troubling about that industry. So many people, some of my favorite comedians, they all had, at least at a certain point, they kind of fizzled out, had to go somewhere else, do something different. That industry kind of brings people in and then spits people out. Red Fox learned the hard way of what that industry can do, what having all the exuberance and the money and the cars and the clothes and everything does. Man died at 68. working on a TV show, trying to pay off all of his tax debt that he accumulated. That's a sad way to go out. You die you die on set. That's how Red Fox went out, you know. Some point most of our favorite comedians aren't going to be around, you know. You see Cat Williams or you see somebody like Dave Chappelle, well, they they're well grounded. And I will also go on and say Eddie Murphy is another person that is well grounded, that he didn't let the celebrity hype get to his head. And it's amazing that Eddie Murphy didn't get caught up in the bullshit because he got out while he still had a chance. Because he could have got engulfed in all the bullshit of the 80s, and people don't even really acknowledge that about Eddie Murphy. Um, how he was able to keep himself grounded and not slip into crazy shit like drinking and drugs. You know, Freddie Prince Jr. learned the hard way. Was on top of everything at 22. Had hottest show on TV, Chico and the Man, and then all of a sudden you hear he's on drugs. He shot himself in the head. He's fucking paranoid. And I think about that. It's like, celebrity, your ego can make you do shit that you didn't think would get to you. And that's when, all the money in the world couldn't really solve people's problems, even if they've made it. That's one of the reasons why once you get in the business, you have to be very grounded, because most people don't know how to be grounded. And that's when people get all this money and they don't know what to do with it because they've never seen anything like that before. When you grow up poor, like a lot of these comedians do, you know, first thing they do, they get their first million, and then the first thing they do is buy a car before they buy a house, which is fucking stupid. It's just, it Cat Williams made me think about a lot of things with these comedians. Even though some of them are pretty good, they doing good. They doing whatever they have to do to survive. I mean, I don't see Steve Harvey out here broke and destitute or nothing like that. He's always gonna get shows. And DL Hughley landed on his feet very well, had a successful sitcom, still doing stand up from time to time, and you know, I guess doing radio. So he's landed pretty well. Not everybody's going to be on top of shit. That I do know. But the one lesson I took away from this interview that was done is the comedy industry is extremely toxic. Entertainment industry in of itself is very, very toxic. People look to get over on you. People look to screw you over. It'll bite you in the ass. Then when they done with you, they on to the next big thing. And that's why people have to learn how to stay grounded because it could all be over just like that in the blink of an eye. It's one thing I took away from that. I thought at one point I wanted to be in stand up. Well, I wanted to be a comedian, but then I think about it, I was like, nah, I don't think I would do that. Even though it looks fun, but getting up on that stage and trying to make people laugh and bearing your soul to the world, that's a hard thing for somebody to do. And then to get little money for it, because you don't get money doing, you do tours, but you don't get much money doing comedy clubs or comedy gigs. It's just crazy. Man, I just wanted to shoot this video out for you guys. Don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for more upcoming videos. We got some more videos coming up this month, so stay tuned and thank you for tuning in to Media Talks TV. I'm Tony J. I'm out.